the chairman for yielding me and for his support of this legislation. Mr. Chairman, this is very simple bipartisan legislation that would require organizers of presidential libraries to disclose the identity of donors and the amounts they give. It wouldn't limit any donations, but it simply would require disclosure. I introduced this legislation several Congresses ago because I felt then and feel now that the public should be made aware of possible conflicts of interest that sitting presidents can have or may have while raising funds for their libraries. I want to first of all thank Ranking Member Cummings for again co-sponsoring this very important legislation and making it bipartisan. The legislation is so bipartisan that after the first time we passed the bill, and it passed 392 to 3, it was taken over at my request and with my agreement by then Chairman Waxman, who made it his bill, and we passed it once again, and we passed it in the last Congress by a simple voice vote. So there's a lot of support for this bill. It's been introduced by Mr. Carper and Mr. Coburn when he was in the Senate, and we need to get some more interest over there, and I think we're going to be able to do that in this Congress. Mr. Chairman, we do not know who these donors to the presidential libraries are or what interests they may have on any pending policy decisions that are to be made. I think that our government needs to operate in the open, not with secrecy. And then this legislation will apply to all future presidential libraries and mandate, regardless of party, that the names of the donors and the amounts they contribute are disclosed. I would like to add that this legislation will apply to President Trump's future presidential library. This will require him to disclose more than any other president has ever had to disclose before. This will be an unprecedented disclosure and falls in line with his stated desire to drain the swamp. Any sitting president has a great deal of power. Funds should not be raised for a presidential library in their honor without some type of public disclosure. I decided to introduce this bill after news reports, after I read news reports surrounding a presidential library exposed or disclosed that foreign governments from the Middle East were making very large donations. In 2007, the Washington Post reported that President Clinton's presidential library raised a substantial percentage of its library with foreign contributions. However, this is not a partisan issue. I've introduced this and supported this legislation under both Democratic and Republican presidents. The Presidential Library Donation Reform Act of 2017 would bring clarity to the process of planning and building these presidential libraries. In 2013, Sunlight Foundation Policy Director Daniel Schuman endorsed an earlier version of this bill during a hearing in front of our House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and he said it, quote, would provide valuable information on special interests whose donations put them in close proximity with presidents. Then even Richard Cohen, the very liberal columnist for the Washington Post, once said about this bill, but surely it would be anything from interesting to illustrative to just plain damning to see what names are on the list and for what amounts. Our citizens have the right to know the details of these fundraising activities. This bill has been introduced by the Center for Media Democracy, Center for Responsive Politics, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, often known as CREW, Common Cause, Public Citizen, the Society of Professional Journalists, and many others. USA Today wrote a very favorable editorial about this bill, and it's been mentioned favorably in many publications across the years. And I think it's a bill that everybody on both sides of the aisle can support. And I yield back the balance of my time and ask my colleagues to support this very bipartisan legislation.